I call the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure to order. Today, we will consider H.R. 185 to designate the United States Courthouse located at 101 East Pecan Street in Sherman, Texas, as the Paul Brown United States Courthouse. H.R. 579 to designate the United States Courthouse located at 501 East Court Street in Jackson, Mississippi, as the R. Jess Brown United States Courthouse. H.R. 2251 to designate the United States Courthouse located at 118 South Mill Street in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, as the Edward J. Devitt United States Courthouse. H.R. 1961 to amend Title 46 to extend the exemption from fire-retardant materials construction requirement for vessels operating within the boundary line. And H.R. 2353 to amend Title 23 with respect to the operation of vehicles on certain Wisconsin highways and for other purposes. I now recognize Mr. Barletta for a motion.
Pursuant to Rule 1A.1 of the Rules of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, I move that the Chairman be authorized to declare recess during today's markup.
The question is on the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Our first order of business is to consider H.R. 185, a bill to designate United States Courthouse in Sherman, Texas, as the Paul Brown United States Courthouse. I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management and call up H.R. 185, and that the bill be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. I recognize Subcommittee Chairman Barletta to explain the bill.
H.R. 185 would designate the United States Courthouse located at 101 East Pecan Street in Sherman, Texas, as the Paul Brown United States Courthouse. During World War II, Judge Paul Brown enlisted in the United States Navy. In 1950, he graduated from the University of Texas School of Law and started a law practice in Sherman, Texas. In 1953, he served as an Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Texas and later as the United States Attorney. In 1985, he was appointed by President Ronald Reagan to serve as District Judge for the Eastern District of Texas. He served as a District Judge and then as a Senior District Judge until his death in 2012. I think it is fitting to honor his service to this nation by naming this courthouse after him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize the Ranking Member, Mr. Rahal, for a statement on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, the Subcommittee Chairman has explained the bill adequately. We have no problems on this side of the aisle.
Do other members wish to be recognized as statements on the pending measure? Seeing none, we will now consider the bill for amendment. Are there any amendments? I recognize Mr. Barletta for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 185 be approved and reported favorably to the House.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The bill is approved and ordered favorably to the House. We will next consider H.R. 579, a bill to designate the courthouse in Jackson, Mississippi, as the R. Jess Brown United States Courthouse. I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management and call up H.R. 579 and that the bill be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Is there an objection? Without objection, so ordered. I recognize Subcommittee Chairman Barletta to explain the bill.
H.R. 579 would designate the United States Courthouse located at 501 East Court Street in Jackson, Mississippi, as the R. Jess Brown United States Courthouse. R. Jess Brown attended Illinois State University, Indiana University, and the Texas Southern University Law School. In the 1960s, he was one of only 4 African-American lawyers in Mississippi. In 1962, he worked on behalf of James Meredith, whose successful lawsuit allowed him to be the first African-American student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. I think it is appropriate to honor the work of Mr. Brown by naming this courthouse after him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, and now recognize Mr. Rahal for a statement on the bill.
The Subcommittee Chairman has explained the bill adequately. Mr. Chairman, we have no problems on this side.
Do any other members wish to be recognized? Seeing none, we will now consider amendments for the bill. Are there any amendments? Seeing no amendments, I recognize Mr. Barletta for a final motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 579 be approved and reported favorably to the House.
The question is on the motion. All in favor by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The bill is approved and ordered to the House, reported favorably to the House. Now we will take up H.R. 2251, a bill that designates the United States Courthouse in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, as the Edward J. Devitt United States Courthouse. I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management and call up H.R. 2251 and that the bill be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. I recognize Subcommittee Barletta to explain the bill.
H.R. 2251 would designate the United States Courthouse located at 118 South Mill Street in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, as the Edward J. Devitt United States Courthouse. Judge Devitt attended the University of North Dakota. Early in his career, he served as the judge on the Minnesota Municipal Court and as Assistant Attorney General for Minnesota. During World War II, he was a lieutenant commander in the United States Naval Reserve. Judge Devitt later became a United States representative from Minnesota. In 1954, Judge Devitt was appointed to the United States District Court for the District of Minnesota and served as the chief judge from 1959 to 1981. I think it is appropriate to honor the work of Judge Devitt by naming this courthouse and federal building after him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. At this time, I recognize Ranking Member Rahal for a statement on the bill. I thank the gentleman. Wish to recognize any other members who wish to be heard on the pending measure. Seeing none, we'll now consider a bill for amendment. Are there any amendments? Are there any amendments?
Yes,
I recognize Mr. Barletta for an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk. I ask unanimous consent the amendment be considered as read.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 70, offered by Mr. Barletta.
Mr. Barletta is recognized to speak on the amendment.
The amendment would add the words federal building to the building designation. We understand from GSA that the building is not exclusively a courthouse. The amendment would make this clarification by designating the building as the Edward J. Devitt United States Courthouse and federal building. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. And do any members wish to be recognized on the amendment? Are there any other? Seeing none, are there any other amendments? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments to the bill? I recognize Mr. Barletta for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 2251 as amended be approved and reported favorably to the House.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The bill is approved and ordered favorably, reported favorably to the House. We now are going to go to H.R. 2353. H.R. 2353 to amend Title 23 with respect to the operation of vehicles on certain Wisconsin highways and for other purposes. Our final order, or excuse me, to consider H.R. 23, a bill to amend Title 23. I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Highways and Transit and call up H.R. 2353, and that the bill be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Is there an objection? Without an objection, so ordered. I recognize Subcommittee Chair Petri to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. U.S. Highway 41 between Milwaukee and Green Bay is slated to become part of the interstate system early next year. The state's spending roughly $1.5 billion to upgrade and expand this corridor, which is an indication of the importance of the highway. It functions as an interstate now, carrying commerce, people, and looks like an interstate and deserves this designation. The bill would simply allow heavier currently operating trucks to continue to operate after the interstate designation, primarily agricultural during harvest season, milk, timber, scrap metal, and garbage. No new heavier trucks would be allowed on the new 41 interstate. This would just maintain the status quo and not disrupt the current flow of commerce. Wisconsin State Patrol has issued a statement in support of the bill. It's also supported by the Democratic members of and Republican members of our House delegation. Senator Tammy Baldwin, Senator Ron Johnson have introduced companion legislation this week, and I would ask favorable consideration of the bill.
I recognize Ranking Member Rahal for a statement on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Congress has previously grandfathered truck weights on roads that obtained interstate designation including Interstate 99 in Pennsylvania, Interstate 39 in Wisconsin, and Interstate 68 in Maryland. I point that out to note that what is being proposed today in the pending legislation is not without precedent or justification. So I have no objection to the efforts of my good friend, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Petri, on this bill. The Wisconsin DOT anticipates completing the necessary changes to meet interstate standards on a stretch of road, Route 41, between Milwaukee and Green Bay sometime in 2014. Without this legislation, when the conversion is complete, trucks traveling on the new I-41 will be subject to Federal size and weight rules, which are more restrictive than Wisconsin State rules. The pending measure ensures that livestock, farm, and forest products and other oversized and overweight loads hauled on Route 41 today will continue to be legal. While I support this legislation, approval of this bill today should not be construed as an indicator of movement on the broader debate of whether to increase truck weights generally. This is a limited extension of current standards on one road in one state, and I am evaluating it as such. I will support this bill and urge its adoption.
I thank the gentleman from West Virginia for his statement and also for educating me. I didn't realize I-99 had that exemption, and I had nothing to do with it.
Really? Do you know the name of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Same initials, different first name. I now wish to recognize any other members who wish to be heard. Mr. Ribble from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And very briefly, I want to thank Chairman Petri. I want to thank the comments from Ranking Member Rahal. This is a status quo bill, allows us to continue the operation of current vehicle size that's already permitted. Primarily, the only difference between this and standing Federal law relates to the agriculture and timber products. And I thank my fellow colleagues for considering it and encourage passage. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We will now consider the bill for amendment. Are there any amendments? Seeing none, I recognize Mr. Petri for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 2353 be approved and report favorably to the House.
Question is on the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The bill is approved and ordered reported favorably to the House. And now we will go to H.R. 1961, to amend Title 46 to extend the exemption from the fire-retardant materials construction requirement for vessels operating within the boundary line. I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation and call up H.R. 1961, and that the bill be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Is there an objection? Without objection, so ordered. I recognize Subcommittee Chairman Hunter to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Chairman of the Subcommittee on Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation, I support H.R. 1961. The bill renews the exemption for the Delta Queen from certain Coast Guard requirements adopted decades after the vessel's construction. The Delta Queen, a paddle wheel riverboat, was built in 1926. It operated in California until 1947 and then carried tourists up and down the Mississippi and Ohio rivers for more than 60 years. 40 years after the vessel's construction, Congress set new rules prohibiting wooden ships from carrying 50 or more overnight passengers. The vessel has a steel hull but a wooden superstructure. Between 1968 and 2008, the Delta Queen operated under an exemption from the restriction on wooden passenger vessels, which was renewed 9 times by Congress. The vessel has not served as a passenger vessel since the exemption expired in 2008. H.R. 1961 reinstates the Delta Queen exemption. The vessel is otherwise subject to Coast Guard passenger vessel safety requirements. It must undergo required inspections and receive a Coast Guard certificate of inspection, just like any other vessel carrying overnight passengers. I commend my colleague Steve Chabot and the bill's 21 bipartisan co-sponsors for introducing this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill and allow this historic vessel to return to the river. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman, and with that, I recognize the Ranking Member Rahal for a statement.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, during my tenure as Chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, I worked hard to protect icons of America's heritage, such as the majestic Yellowstone bison and the herd and our free-ranging wild horses. Today, as the ranking member on the T&I Committee, I'm in favor of preserving yet another icon of our American heritage, the Delta Queen. Constructed in 1926, the Delta Queen started out on the Sacramento River. In 1948, she entered into passenger service on the waters of the Ohio, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Cumberland rivers. Today, she is a designated National Historic Landmark. Built before modern fire safety standards, started in 1966, Congress granted the Delta Queen an exemption from those standards and did so throughout the years without incident. The last exemption expired at the end of 28 and has not been revisited. Currently, an investment team is seeking to purchase a vessel and have engaged cooperatively with the Seafarers Union. They want to restore the vessel and return it to service. According to news reports, this team is planning on investing $10 million into the Delta Queen. I, too, would like to see this historic paddle wheel steamboat return to service, but I would like to see it done safely. In this regard, and to be clear, the pending legislation would renew the exemption from the fire safety requirements. However, in every other respect, the vessel would still be required to receive certification from the Coast Guard. Further, as a passenger vessel, it would be subject to annual inspections. I would further note that in the applicable Coast Guard regulations, when a vessel is exempted from the fire retardant standards, and I quote, A, the owner or managing operator of the vessel shall notify prospective passengers that the vessel does not comply with applicable fire safety standards due primarily to the wooden construction of passenger berthing areas, and B, the owner or managing operator of the vessel may not disclaim liability to a passenger for death, injury, or any other loss caused by fire due to the negligence of the owner or managing operator, end quote. With this said, and in light of the support that this bill has from the seafarers, the fact that it means good-paying jobs, and that a unique part of Americana would be restored to service, I support the pending legislation. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Any other members wish to seek recognition? Mr. Massey is recognized for 5 minutes for a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge passage of H.R. 1961. This bill seeks to protect a historic treasure, the Delta Queen steamboat. As was stated before, the debut cruise took place on June 2, 1927, and for the next 13 years she ran overnight trips between Sacramento and San Francisco. What some people may not know is from 1940 to 1946, she served the U.S. Navy as a floating barracks and training facility in the San Francisco Bay. And on June 30, 1948, the Delta Queen took her first cruise on the Ohio River. She carried tourists up and down the Mississippi and Ohio rivers for more than 20 years. In 1966, Congress passed the Safety of Life at Seas Act. The law banned ships with a wooden superstructure from carrying more than 50 overnight passengers. Although this bill was intended for ocean-going ships, the Delta Queen was caught in the law's overly broad provisions. She was granted an exemption, but this exemption was revoked at some point. It's our goal to save the Delta Queen by returning her to the river. We've introduced bipartisan legislation to reinstate the vessel's longstanding exemption and hope that other members on this committee will join me in supporting this effort. The H.R. 1961 is supported by Seafarers International Union, the American Maritime Officers, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Please help us save the Delta Queen by passing H.R. 1961 today. Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and with that, recognize Mr. Garamendi from California for a statement for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that my written statement be entered into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I'll try to shorten this, and perhaps I'm on the short end of the vote around here on this one. But I rise in strong opposition to this. This legislation, while reinstating the exemption for the venerable paddle wheel steamship Delta Queen, it is a wood superstructure. The issue was last raised in 2008 in the 110th Congress, and they decided wisely, in my view, not to renew this ill-advised exemption. They were more interested then in maritime safety, the safety of the seafarers and the other union members that are on the ship, as well as the guests that would be on the ship. I have little choice but to oppose this, based both on process and substance. With regard to the process, this should have been a hearing. This is not a simple issue. This is an important issue of public safety and the safety of the men and women that are operating the ship. But we didn't do that. Instead, we came directly here. So in the absence of that hearing, we need to understand exactly what is at stake. This ship has been tied up on the waterfront since 2009. Have any improvements taken place since that time? We don't know. We're also told that with regard to the substance of the issue, that there is, in fact, a public safety issue. The Coast Guard has been very, very clear on this matter. They have said this is an unnecessary safety hazard. This is not an issue of subjective. The Coast Guard has inspected, they've done this inspection, and they say overnight accommodations should not be allowed on this ship. Very, very clear about that. There have also been fires on this ship. 2008, twice there were fires. Now, I understand the entrepreneurs that want to take over this ship want this because they say they can get venture capital money if they have an exemption until 2028. An exemption until 2028. In other words, they could operate this ship, should this become law, doing nothing to improve the fire safety standards on the ship. Simply an assertion brought to me third or fourth hand that, oh, by the way, we are going to improve it. Why we would put a bill through that exempts until 2028 the fire safety standards on this ship with some vague notion that they will somehow deal with those issues. I don't get it. Ultimately, and the very same week that we have received a report from the United States Coast Guard on a little problem that occurred on the Carnival Splendor having to do with fires, we're going to exempt another ship from fire safety standards? I don't think so. At least we ought not do so. If we want to move forward with this, write a bill that says you will get an exemption when this meets fire safety standards and you have the improvements in place. Now, we can consider that, I suppose. But no, we're just going to exempt it to 2000.
Will the gentleman yield?
Strong in
Not quite yet.
strong in the.
Not quite yet. The,
Who's going to take over highway?
here are the words of the Coast Guard. Operating an overnight passenger trade presents an unacceptable fire risk to its passengers and crew. It's the U.S. Coast Guard. They have the responsibility here for determining the safety of these ships. They're carrying out the law, and we ought not be providing exemption. I'll be happy to yield to the chairman of the subcommittee.
Thank the ranking member. I just want to clarify. The only exemption being made is for the actual hull or the superstructure. The hull is steel, the superstructure is wooden, but they're held to all other standards, and there have been improvements. They have to comply with all other Coast Guard regulations, and they've installed a sprinkler system and a carbon dioxide flooding system for fire suppression, and they have to meet every other standard. The only exemption is for the superstructure. Because it was 100 years old, basically, it's wooden. But that is the exemption. I yield back.
Well, thank you for pointing out it is the superstructure, which is all the ship except the hull. And it's all wood. And it's narrow passages. I know this ship. Never been on this one, but I've been on the exact twin of it. It's moored in Sacramento, on the Sacramento River. And I can tell you I've probably been on that ship 20 times over the last 10 years.
Gentleman's time has expired. Any other members seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Young.
Mr. Chairman, as the only licensed mariner around here, I strongly support this legislation. If we're going to destroy, as the ranking member said, landmarks, historical objects that are held in reverence, I suggest respectfully we eliminate the Golden Gate Bridge. They still paint it with lead paint. And last time I heard, lead paint was inappropriate to use, but they're doing it and have done it forever. And as the lead flakes are going to fall down, and we're going to lead contamination, so let's tear it down. This ship is safe. And if you read the bill very carefully, it will be inspected every year. It will meet the standards, as the chairman has said. And I've been on this ship. It was built in California. It was used in the Sacramento River. And I suggest respectfully, because it has now been supported by the SUI, has been supported by, I think, everyone, according to Mr. Massey. This is time that this committee steps up and save our landmarks. Save our landmarks. The idea of someone to say this is unsafe is untrue. There is no official position by the Coast Guard on this legislation. As a member of the committee and the chairman of this committee, we've been through this battle over and over and over again. So I'm suggesting respectfully we pass this legislation, get it moving, and do it correct. And I will yield to the gentleman, Mr. Massey, if he wants to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I'd like to remind the members that this is a bipartisan bill, and when it came up in 2008, then Senator Barack Obama supported the bill as well. He stated, "As the last remaining authentic, operable riverboat in the world, the Delta Queen is a valuable part of our nation's heritage that we have a duty to preserve and protect for future generations." And that was then Senator Barack Obama. So I just wanted to read that.
Reclaiming my time, let's just
Thank
pass this legislation and get it over with. Yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Young. And with that, any other members seek recognition? Mr. Cohen is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be quite brief. I am from Memphis, and Memphis is on the Mississippi River, and we've been the home port, a port where the Delta Queen has stopped over the years. I saw the Delta Queen and visited it on its last trip up the river, and it was an emotional trip knowing that it wouldn't be coming back to Memphis. There were a lot of people there that had fond memories of the ship and enjoyed traveling on it. It's part of our culture. It's part of our tourism industry. It's part of America's history and America's tourism industry. I appreciate the Chairman scheduling the bill and Mr. Shabbat and the other co-sponsors, including Mr. Clay from St. Louis, another river city, for bringing it again. I'm a co-sponsor, and I've been a co-sponsor with Mr. Shabbat since I came to Congress on this bill. I look at my former chairman there, and I respect him greatly. It was difficult in a way to be, it was difficult to be against him on this bill. He had strong feelings, but a lot of those feelings, I think, were political. And some of those political differences have been settled. I appreciate this bill and hope everybody votes for it, and I think it's the best thing for all.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
I'm glad to yield to my dear friend from the Golden State.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And this ship can still be operated for day use. It can move up and down the Mississippi River, the Ohio, and any other river that's deep enough for its shallow draft. The question here is overnight accommodations. The ship can operate, assuming that it meets all the other safety standards, as was stated by the chair of the subcommittee. It can operate. The question is overnight accommodations. And in fact, it can overnight accommodate less than 50, but not 74. So there's room here for this ship to continue. And nobody's suggesting that this historic icon be trashed or disappear. It can operate on the rivers of the United States. Want to bring it back to Sacramento, it can operate on the Sacramento River, but not for overnight accommodations for more than 50 people.
No, we don't want to.
That was a question. Is that correct?
I don't know if that's a question or not. We gave you Tyreek Evans for a few years. We're not giving you the Delta Queen. The Delta Queen should be at
the Golden Gate Bridge, are you?
Should not be taken. No, you can keep the Golden Gate Bridge too, and that's great. But the Delta Queen should operate at night. Some of its best activity happens at night. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Any other members seeking recognition? Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since there was no hearing on this bill, I have a question. I believe I heard the ranking member say that this bill would still require that passengers be notified that the ship doesn't meet the standard, the fire standard. So I wonder how that notification takes place. Will there be signs posted around on the ship saying we don't meet safety standards? Will it be printed on the ticket that says we don't meet safety standards? Little placket in the bathroom by the wash your hands before you leave, we don't meet safety standards? How's that going to work?
Staff.
My understanding is the notification takes place when the ticket is sold. That's part of the package that's provided to them. My understanding is the notification takes place when the ticket is sold, and that's the point at which you're notified.
Would that be before you pay or after?
I assume after you pay, but.
Thank you.
Gentlelady, yield back. Any other members wish to seek recognition? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, UC request, please.
I recognize the ranking member for UC.
I ask unanimous consent that 3 letters be made part of the record. Endorsement of this legislation by the Seafarers International Union, by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and by the American Maritime Officers. And I would also note with Chairman Young's endorsement, that's 2 former chairmen of the House Natural Resources Committee, bipartisan, endorsing this legislation. Thank you.
With no objection, so ordered. Mr. Nolan seeks recognition.
Just a quick question here. Does the Coast Guard support this, or do they not?
Chairman of the subcommittee, wish to answer that?
The Coast Guard has no position.
Any other member seeking recognition? Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm from Texas, so we don't expect to have the ship, but I got one question. Does it create jobs? I move we pass.
Right, we'll move now to consider this bill for amendment. Are there any amendments? Seeing none, we'll ask Mr. Duncan. Mr. Garamendi has an amendment.
No, I don't have an amendment, but I have on the question of the Coast Guard position that was asked a moment ago.
Excuse me, the gentleman has a question on the Coast Guard position?
The issue of the Coast Guard position was asked a moment ago.
Yes.
I contacted the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard stands by its earlier evaluation of the vessel's safety.
Mr. Hunter, you care to?
Yeah. The Coast Guard has no official position. What the Coast Guard responded to was current law, which states right now without the exemption they cannot operate. Therefore, according to the Coast Guard, they cannot operate. If we were to provide the exemption, then the Coast Guard's position would be to comply with current law and allow the ship to operate.
Well, of course. Of course they'd comply with current law. But the issue is the question of safety.
Right. Well, the gentleman, we're in the amendment process.
I thank the ranking member, but the answer is the Coast Guard has no official position on this.
And we're in the amendment process. Does the gentleman have an amendment to offer? Seeing no amendment, we will now recognize Mr. Hunter for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 1961 be approved and reported favorably to the House.
Questions on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. This bill is approved and ordered reported favorably to the House.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Pursuant to Clause 2L of the House Rule 11 and Clause D of Committee Rule 7, I notice my intent to file supplemental minority or additional views for inclusion on the report to the House on H.R. 1961.
The gentleman is correct and expect to see those views. I ask unanimous consent that each bill ordered reported today be reported as a single amendment in the nature of a substitute incorporating any amendments adopted. Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make all necessary technical, clarifying, and conforming changes to each of the bills ordered reported today to reflect the actions of the committee. Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the chairman, after consultation with the ranking member, have authority to strike or revise any provisions of any of these bills ordered reported today that would cause a sequential referral to another committee, or that would cause the bill to be subject to a Budget Act or Rule 21 Cutco point of order. Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the committee authorize the chairman or his designee to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House or go to conference with the Senate on the following bills that were ordered reported by the committee today or similar Senate bills: H.R. 185, H.R. 597, H.R. 2251 as amended, H.R. 1961, and H.R. 2353. Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to the Rule 5 of the Rules on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, the Chair notes the presence of a quorum for the action taken on the committee business today. The committee is adjourned.